At this time, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our facilitator. Following a successful career in public education, or public service, and also public education, spanning more than 25 years, which culminated as Missouri's treasurer and then as Missouri's governor, Bob Holden is now a recognized influence in the private sector. Governor Holden uses his rich experience, his communications network, and his ability to inspire others as tools in economic development and public policy education. Through events, education, and public forums, Governor Bob Holden invites communities, students, policy leaders, businesses, and investors to think differently about how the central United States engages with the world. Governor Holden is the founder and director of the Holden Public Policy Forum at Webster University. He currently serves as chairman of the Midwest U.S.-China Association, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that encourages commerce between 12 states in the Midwestern United States and China. The work of the MWCA is founded on its fundamental values of growth, partnership, and opportunity, and strives to increase awareness of the unlimited potential available in the Midwest, which offers unparalleled capacity for innovation and economic growth. Throughout his career, Governor Holden's primary domestic issue focus has been a focus on children and on education. And it is truly my personal and professional pleasure to introduce a visionary, a friend, and our moderator today, former Missouri Governor Bob Holden.
Thank you very much, Chris. Delighted to be with all of you once again. I wasn't in the room when the last two speakers, including the Commissioner of Education, spoke, but I did have an opportunity to read their comments, and I agree with everything that they said. If nothing else, maybe they understated some of it. But we could not have a stronger, more effective Commissioner of Elementary and Secondary Education in Missouri than Chris Castro. Thank you, Chris, for the leadership that you've done. I want to start out by stating that I am hopeful, optimistic about our future. The changes that I've seen in our educational system from the time I was a first grader in a one-room schoolhouse through starting the Dollars and Cents program and the MOST program as treasurer, and later as governor, the evolution of our education of the younger generations has truly become an international one. We need to understand that our nation's history, but we realize our current students will be entering a new and more complex world. We as a nation, region, state, and community are facing two parallel crises, one being education quality, and the second, a weakening economy, both in which the solutions are interwoven. The first crisis, being a weakened national economy, is brought on by globalization. The second crisis is an educational system that was developed for a different time and a different economy, and is failing to keep pace with the rest of the world. Let me stress that time and circumstances are not on our side. The world is not waiting for us to figure it out. In 2009, the organization Common Core launched a study of the 9 nations or territories that consistently outperform the United States on the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA. Finland, Hong Kong, South Korea, Canada, Japan, New Zealand, Austria, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. The one thing that they all shared was a sense of responsibility that everyone from parents, community, teachers, administrators, their entire culture was responsible for providing the students with a content-rich, broad-based, internationally competitive education. We must change and adapt or watch our influence, power, prestige, and leadership continue to diminish in the marketplace, seats of government, and in world commerce. Our weakening influence in the world will not stop unless we are willing to change, make some tough decisions, and support visionary leaders at all levels of our society who are willing to provide the leadership necessary for success. Let me address the why question first. In the past, our economy and the success of our nation was based on each region utilizing its people in agriculture and manufacturing in the most productive way possible. With each generation, advancing technologies led to greater benefits, but also the use of fewer people to produce more goods. The days of mass production and assembly line manufacturing, being the foundation for our country's wealth, are at an end. In today's global environment, we have two competing forces working against each other: people versus technology, but for the first time on a global scale. As Thomas Friedman has said, the world is flat. No society or culture is protected from the globalization process. For over 200 years, our economy relied on manpower for agricultural and manufacturing dominance, while being protected from undue foreign influence. Due to our abundant natural resources, geography, strong work ethic, our cultural heritage, our transforming educational system, our protectionist policies, we were able to slowly develop and later dominate global geopolitics and the global economy as a world power. In particular, the Midwest thrived in this atmosphere. We became the breadbasket and manufacturing hubs for the world. All of our institutions, from governing to education, evolved during this time period. But beginning in the 1960s, we have witnessed the most rapid change in history in terms of technology and globalization. When I spoke at the Missouri Dropout Prevention Summit, Bob Wise was one of our speakers, former West Virginia governor, and the president of Alliance for Excellence Education. He shared with me his comment: the time American workers spend doing routine manual tasks and routine cognitive tasks has declined significantly since the 1960s, as automation and computers have taken over that responsibility. There is more technology in a modern car than was used to put the first man on the moon. Over this same time period, the time workers spent performing high-level cognitive tasks has dramatically increased, and in general, jobs are demanding much higher skill level. In the 1960s, the United States was ranked #1 in terms of the number of individuals who had successfully completed high school or the equivalent qualifications. But by the 1990s, we were ranked 13th. We are still making progress, but the facts are that other nations are making much faster progress. Farhad Zakari has said these results are defined less by American decline than by the rise of the rest. With many nations surging ahead in school attainment, our skills slowdown is the biggest issue facing the country. One hurdle we must overcome is the perception that all we have to do is to be better than our neighboring schools, communities, or states. No longer is it relevant to compare our dropout rates or test scores with those in our neighboring communities, states, or regions. We must compete, and we are compared in a global community. And the indicators reveal that we are no longer leading the industrialized world in any subject area. We must accept and adopt a more global outlook. In 2009, the United States was among the 34 developed countries and territories that participate in the OECD Program for International Student Assessment, PISA. On that exam, our nation showed some improvement in math and science since 2006. Unfortunately, according to 2009 PISA data, American high schoolers are now ranked 15th in reading, 23rd in science, and 31st in mathematics. Our students are, at best, still in the middle of the global pack at a time when education plays a decisive role in the success of our young people and the strength of our economy. Yet desperate than improving rank in reading, the world is improving faster. Only about 1/3 of our 15-year-olds in the United States meet reading benchmarks that indicate readiness for higher level work. These results reveal that our Educational Secretary, Arne Duncan, has said, describes a brutal truth. American students are ill prepared for the demands that they will face after high school. But at the beginning, I said, I am still optimistic about our future because we have people like you in this room, people like Chris and governors and others, leaders, willing to stand up and really tell us the truth about what we need to do. I've had the opportunity to listen to many people on education reform, see real success being achieved in all kinds of classrooms, and see the excitement in the eyes of young people who have been challenged, responded to these challenges, and enjoy success. We can do it. It is being done all over this country, in schools all across this country, willing to make the changes. We need to break out of these rigid and inflexible concepts of what our educational system has become. We must embrace a diverse and complex world of people, places, and ideas. The Midwest has led the world in 2 historical transformations in the past. It is time we lead the world in the 3rd. The question is how? We must broaden the knowledge base of our students to include language, geography, and history. And I might add arts back into our programs in many areas. In the 2006 study, 6 out of 10 young Americans, 63%, could not find Iraq or Saudi Arabia on a map of the Middle East, while 75% could not locate Iran, and nearly 9 out of 10 were unable to identify Afghanistan, and 70% could not find North Korea. We have our 3 R's. Confucianism has its 3 R's: relationships, respect, and responsibility. There are 330 million Chinese students in schools today. That's more than the entire population of the United States. English is spoken by more people in China than in the United States. Without knowing something about Confucian philosophy, it is difficult to understand what motivates children in China and the other parts of Asia to achieve. To be able to appreciate the forces that drive Japanese businesses, it is helpful to study the mythological origins of the Japanese and their sense of divine destiny. Without knowing Africa, Central and South America history, how can we know how it has shaped ours? Islam has to become something more in the minds of students than simply a group of fanatics who blew up the World Trade Center. Just as Christianity is more than the Inquisition or the Crusades. Islam is the single most important influence shaping a sizable portion of the world's population. How can we compete and how can we negotiate if we don't understand the culture from which the people we're negotiating with come from? We have to learn. We have to understand. The next question is when. The answer is now. As Kent Farnsworth, who is a Missourian, by the way, wrote in his book, Grassroots School Reform, positive change that is needed depends on our ability as a country to regain our international competitiveness in education and job preparation and reassert our position as the world's leader in educational achievements. Who prepares the best minds for tomorrow? Who invents the newest technologies? They are going to lead the next generation and shape the world. We must reform our curriculum, create an educational structure for the future, not hold on to the past, and we must reestablish our nation's place as a place of learning. We must be leaders by helping our students to become world leaders if we want to continue to lead the world. Ken Farnsworth was telling me one time on a plane trip back from overseas, he was saying to a Chinese woman, student, who was coming to the United States to further her education. And she said to him, "My head is full of facts, but I came to the United States to learn how to think." I say it a different way, but it means the same thing. Many students around the world know the facts. Our educational system has, over the years, taught us how to connect those dots. We've got to be able to connect those dots in the years ahead to be successful. At the end of my class at Webster University, I teach about political communication. I ask my students to, at the end of the semester, to give me their thoughts and comments. One semester, I had 2 Saudi Arabia students, 1 Chinese student. The Chinese student, at the end, she turned to me and she said, "Governor, I will go back to China a far different person than the one who came to the United States." That is what our educational opportunities means for citizens around the world. We do not have to accept not being the best, but it's going to come about by what we as citizens and what we do as leaders in our country. I'm delighted to be part of this program. I think it is probably critically the single most important discussion that we need to be having, not only in the state of Missouri, but throughout this country, and particularly in the Midwest. We have led. I've never been satisfied with not leading, and I think our best days are yet to come if we're willing to make the changes and demand the resources be put in the areas where it does us the most good to be done. I'm delighted to have with us an outstanding panel. I will let each one of them introduce themselves as they start, and I'll start with Phillip Bradley, the director of Blueriver Creative in New Zealand. I thought I would start with the one from outside the country first so he could give us his thoughts. And you know, in my comments, I mentioned New Zealand as one of the countries that's truly been a leader. So Phillip, with you, take it away.
Thank you, Governor Holden. Standings of positions, I assume. It's been I think it's 3, 4 o'clock in the morning back in New Zealand on Tuesday. So good morning or g'day, or as the local people would, or the Māori would say, kia ora. Thank you for this opportunity. It's been 17 hours of flying, a couple of different flights just to get here, and it's purposefully to come and see you this morning. My longer journey to you today can be really attributed to 2 things. Ironically, a graduation gown and some food. Firstly, the gown. It was way back in the 1990, and I had recently graduated from the University of Auckland in architecture, and I was able to have a job with an architectural practice, only 1 of 3 out of 52 class members who got a job. And I needed a gown for that graduation ceremony. So I turned back to my former high school principal, Colin Prentice, and asked to borrow his gown. This principal was 36 years old, a number of years prior to that, and was starting up a flagship school, which the Ministry of Education had built, and I was privileged enough to join it in its infancy as its first year, and then following years bringing the population up from 200 up to 1,200. And he was seen as an innovative and dynamic young principal. And so I learnt under him and became a friend of his. And so I had the privilege to be able to go and directly ask him about this gown. When I turned up at his house, he broached the question of me becoming a teacher instead of being an architect. And I laughed at him. My mother was a teacher, my father, my brother, my uncle was a principal. And I laughed involuntarily at his request. We've got a shortage in graphics and design. Come for a couple of terms, teach. I'm not a teacher, I said. A few weeks later, I accepted the position. I ended up I ended up at that school for 4 years. And for the latter 2 of those years, I was appointed as Special Projects Manager. You see, at that time, the New Zealand government, the Labour government of the time, as well as preventing nuclear ships coming into our ports in 1986 and creating that divide, if you like, and tension between our 2 countries, had also introduced through changing the Education Act, a reformation of it that was called Tomorrow's Schools. And in that, they had devolved the power from the local central government education boards to local boards of trustees, as they created and termed them. They gave them power as far as funding of staff and of their administrative finances. And so this gave them an opportunity. So when we combined that principle of innovative and dynamic Colin Prentice and also a very entrepreneurial board, we had interesting times, and I was appointed to do the legwork as a young 20-year-old. Teachers training facility, and we investigated Performing Arts Centre, construction of sports facilities, but quite importantly an international student program. Because of that change in Tomorrow's Schools, we were able to open up and do things differently. So 20 years ago, that school sought to bring in students from China, from Asia as a whole, from South America and Europe into the normal school program at a cost. They would charge these students, and they would be fee-paying international students, and they would come in. And this enabled the school to do 2 things: to bring global learning into the classroom on an everyday, year-long basis, not just as an exchange program, but as a fee-paying program. And then secondly, it also enabled the school to get discretionary funds. In New Zealand, 105 million New Zealand dollars is earned each year within the schools, the primary and secondary or high schools. And we have just on average under 10,000 students each year coming into New Zealand. That's all with our population of 4.5 million. I believe Missouri has 6 million or so, thereabouts. So that all started with a gown, 20 years of experience and working with it. I started Blueriver Creative when I left that position, and I went and have been working with international student directors and principals, primarily with graphics and marketing. Second element was food, and specifically American food. In 2002, we had a vice president of marketing for a restaurant chain here in the States approach us about one of our websites that had been produced for an Australian band who was based in Nashville. They liked the way the map moved around. You could drag it and see content, a bit like your iPads are today. This was 10 years ago. He asked us to quote on their website for this restaurant chain, and we quoted, and they accepted, and we've been working with Tony Romer's restaurants online for the last 9 years. That vice president went on to become the CEO, went on to become head of other restaurant chains. And we've established contacts with other companies and people as we've gone on that journey. The point of that is that we've been able to establish relationships with Lone Star Steakhouse and Texas Land and Cattle, Captain D's, a number of others, and to conduct business from the bottom of the South Pacific. So when I combine that idea of food, which represents the American businesses, and the gown, which represents international students for me, it struck me that it would be an opportunity to bring the 2 together. What if does the United States in their public schools, not their private, not their university, but in their public high schools, have a similar program of bringing students from South America or China into New Zealand, into their high school programs? I couldn't really find anything in a fee-paying basis, not an exchange basis, a fee-paying one. So I've come to find out and to hear from you, and that's what I'll be talking about as well this afternoon, and to challenge you as to whether that is applicable in Missouri. Does that opportunity exist for you today? In this afternoon's sessions, I'll elaborate on the benefits and the challenges that we've faced. I'll profile some of the New Zealand schools, put up on the screen some of those pictures and details, and I'll invite your discussion on how you could see perhaps a program operating in your state of Missouri. And really in this day, I want to connect with people in that regard and welcome that dialogue. I count it a privilege to be here, and thank you for your time, Governor Holden, in introducing us. And again, thank you, and I think I am awake now.
Dr. Hagler?
Usually when you're testifying in front of a Congress or up the street there, and they have a little light on there, you can tell whether you're supposed to be saying there going, oh my God, what did they just say? But this one doesn't have the light, so, you know, and they're recording it, so somewhere I'm going to be in trouble before the day's out. But let me just start by saying it is a great pleasure to be here, and for those of you that haven't met your education commissioner personally, Chris Nicastro is not only a fantastic person, but a great educational leader. And I think this is just a testament to the way she, as we say in agriculture, we think outside the barn. And she certainly thinks outside the barn in every respect. And some of you may be wondering, you know, why it is that she would have the Director of Agriculture on a panel for to discuss international education issues. And it's those of you that came from below I-44, I could translate, since I'm a hillbilly as well. I'll be able to make any kind of international translation for you. But the truth is that, you know, we deal with agriculture and international is gone hand in hand for many years. In fact, if I just look around me, we just sent last year a delegation to New Zealand to learn about dairy, particularly pasture-based dairies. There's no better dairy folks in the world than the New Zealanders, other than Missouri dairy people. But we have a lot to learn from one another, and we certainly came back from that. And the folks at the Confucius Institute, to my left here, to your right, Hank, if you'll remember the last time we were together, we were sitting in a formal meeting in Shanghai, checking the World Series on the iPhone underneath the table. We had this app that would tell you the scores, the play-by-play of the game, but it would just say like ball in play. So we're at that vital sixth game, and then, you know, we're down to 2 outs and the last at bat, and then it just says ball in play. Delay, delay, delay. And we're all going crazy, and the delegation's looking at us like, what is wrong with this American delegation? Finally they figured out we all have iPhones underneath here, and we're like, it's the World Series. And a great day. So, you know, I just want to highlight a couple of things, most of which you already know, a little bit in particular to agriculture, and then mostly about what I think we need to be seeing toward the future. And it is, in agriculture, again, whether it's exports or whether it's technology, next generation technology, the changes that have occurred in agriculture as an industry are directly related to the interrelatedness of our country as well as other countries. We feed, clothe, and fuel the world. As we have done that over the last 40 to 60 years, other countries have certainly decided that that is not only a good place to be for their own industries, but also for their countries, and to learn from us and vice versa. That interconnectedness grows at leaps and bounds. In fact, this morning in my preparation for this, I pulled out the latest magazine. We get all these ag journals and ag magazines. There's one in particular. It's considered the Wall Street Journal of Agriculture World. And it's just 25 pages of what's happening in agriculture in the latest news. Comes out every week. In the first 10 pages, on every single page, there was something to do with international agriculture, whether it was the EU and GMO crops, or whether it was the latest in WTO, or whether it was Canada and cool negotiations, which is a meat labeling on country of origin meat, or whether it was MF Global's meltdown and the impact that it's had on futures markets, on our farmers and and producers abroad, or whether it was ethanol in Brazil and the United States and the various negotiations that's going on between there. And story after story after story talked about the interrelatedness of the world and the connectedness of the world. And he gets to something which I think is vitally important as you deal with every day as educators, but it's something that we as a state and as a society have to come to grips with, and that is that change is coming. It is not only coming, it's already, it's happening every day. It's happening readily. It's happening all around us. I went recently to talk to a group of FFA students, and you know, if you've ever been to a FFA, it's like a giant rock concert. They have it in the Hearn Center, and it's, you know, it's 13,000 students. Think about all that energy, 13,000 of them. And you know, I have you'll have to edit this out of your speech because you can't show it to kids, but I have the attention span of a gnat on crack, and I just happened to leave my speech somewhere, I don't know. And I couldn't figure out what I was going to talk about, and I was talking to a guy next to me, and he says, what are you going to talk about? And I said, I don't know, I'm thinking about talking about technology. And he said, oh, that's a mistake. He said, these are FFA kids, you know, they don't want to hear about that. They're going to want to hear about cattle or horses or some kind of thing. I said, no. I said, you won't believe how technologically advanced these kids are. I'm going to talk to them about technology. And he's like, well, you're flopped. It's just 13,000 people. So we get up there, and you know, I'm trying to write the speech in real time as I'm walking to the stage. And so I just decided, you know, I have my phone here. So I just pulled out my iPhone, and I just said, you know, most of you are going to be texting during the speech anyway, so what I want you to do, it's dark, it's a big stadium, what I want you to do is pull out your iPhone and light it up. Just light it up and wave it at me. I mean, some kids are pulling out two. I mean, they're waving, they've got phones, you know, I mean, the whole thing lit up. I mean, just, like, I looked over and winked at the guy who said it wasn't going to be a hit. But what I talked to them about is about, you know, all those app commercials. There's going to be an app for that. Well, in agriculture, there is going to be an app for that. There already is. You're going to be able to check your moisture content. You're going to check whether your cattle are still in the field. You're going to be able to check when you plant, should you plant. You're in international commodity trading. Everything you want to do is going to be handled here. And it's not just going to be handled here in your pocket, it's going to be handled here in every single pocket of everybody that's interested or connected to agriculture in the entire world, and it's going to be done instantaneously. Now that is a global marketplace. That is important to every single consumer, because after all, my favorite ag statistic, which I like to share with everybody, is that 4 out of 4 people eat. Everyone has a stake in agriculture. So if everyone has a stake in agriculture, and agriculture is increasingly tied and interconnected, and every single person should be relying on the intersection of technology, the intersection of international relations, of finance, of science, of agriculture, of their food supply, and it's all going to be in their pocket, it's something we ought to pay attention to. Because if you think about how many times you eat during a day, or how many times you check your phone during a day, that'll give you some idea of the interconnectedness of the world, some idea of what the future has to bring. So what does that say for you as educators? What that says for you is that the value in what you do is that you get to change what I call the funnel of life. You see, life, as we go through it, is a funnel. It's like a giant megaphone, and hopefully you're looking through the narrow end toward the broad end. Now, somewhere along life, particularly when I'm talking to colleges and college kids, I like to tell them that somewhere in life, that thing will start turning on you, and you'll start looking through the big end down to the narrow end. And when you do that, because you're focused on a life, or you're focused on a career, or a job, or a location, you begin to lose that perspective that is oh so important, that you are changing. And that is to broaden that funnel, to keep that funnel turned where the big end is on the out and it's a narrow end, so that the world is open and that the opportunities that are before you, the opportunities that are before that next generation of student, before that next generation of teacher, are not looking down to the narrow specific end of what happens in St. James or Salem, Missouri, where I was raised, not what's looking to happen in a little K-8 rural school, but what that little K-8 rural school is looking out to the world. And that's the value of what you do. That's the importance of what we do as educators, as people that are in policy, is to keep the funnel turned toward the right view, so that the big end is always faced out. Because in tomorrow's world, in fact in today's world, in fact in yesterday's world, we are already to the point where that connectedness between our iPhones between what we eat, between what we learn in school, is all one single thread that woven through the fabric of our life. And that fabric is becoming increasingly important. And for us to be able to compete in the marketplace, just like the governor said, that we have to continue to broaden that funnel. All our students should take a secondary language. Every single one. Not just in schools that can afford it, not just Chinese, but Spanish. Look at the demographics of our own population. Look at the changes that were occurring in our life. You know, when I was young, I couldn't figure out how I was going to, I always wanted to have a broader worldview, and I couldn't figure out how to afford to go abroad, so I moved to LA for a few years, and I learned a lot. You can learn a lot living in Los Angeles, because the world has come to Los Angeles, and you learn to interact with different cultures. And I remember my very first job where I was forced to do something international, when I said, "You are now my new point person to Japan." Now, a country boy from Salem, Missouri, is now the new point person for Japan. I'm saying, "All right, sir, are you sure you want me to head this delegation?" I don't know the first thing. I eat steak. I have no idea what you're talking about. He handed me a pair of chopsticks and said, "You can learn on the plane." And when I landed on the plane, the first thing they served me at some hour, which I do not remember, it was probably breakfast for me, but some hour in the middle of the night, and we landed in the plane, and very gracious host and a big delegation, and he has to make a big deal out of the fact that it's the first time in Japan. And what do they bring me? A cold octopus the size of my hand. That's the first thing I have to pick up with chopsticks, and I have an international delegation expecting me to do it. Now, I ate that octopus, I'll tell you, and I picked it up with those chopsticks, but more importantly, what I learned is that the world is big, and the world is small all at the same time, and my funnel got a lot bigger, so the next 20 trips that I took overseas didn't seem so intimidating. If you can pick up a cold octopus the size of your hand with chopsticks after you've just learned them on the plane, you can do anything. Your funnel is broadened, and that is so vitally important to what you do, and that's why we're glad to be here and glad to be a part of it. Thank you for
coming. You're next.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks to Dr. Nicastro giving me this opportunity to sit down here to talk something what I experienced to you. And I was originally from Shanghai, China, and 10 years ago, I received an admission letter from the University of Missouri, started my PhD degree in international educational leadership and policy analysis, focusing on international education and comparative education. And I spent 5 years, finished my PhD degree at the University of Missouri, and then I started to work for the University of Missouri for the Vice Provost Office for International Program. Here is my boss. So he supervises me everywhere. And 10 years I spent in Missouri, in Columbia, and plus 2 years I finished my EDS degree in higher education administration in Warrensburg, Central Missouri State University. And I really view here Missouri, Columbia as my second hometown. Every time I feel very interested in, when I go back to Shanghai, I feel I go home. When I come back, I sit on the MOX from St. Louis Lambert Airport to Columbia. I feel I go home too. So that's a very good feeling for me. No any strange anymore. And now the society is really the global society. And I met Dr. Hagler not in the United States. The first time I met Dr. Hagler in Shanghai, China. And then 1 month ago, I met former Governor Bob Holden in Beijing, China at the Confucius Institute conference. At that time, Dr. Bob Holden served on the panelist in Beijing also. And several years ago, MU Independent Study Center asked me to write an online Chinese curriculum for high school students across the United States. And MU Independent Study Center, they hire many professional native speakers to write online curriculum, foreign language curriculum. And the Chinese curriculum, I'm in charge of that. And when I told this to a professor at MU, this professor, that's 2006, that professor asked me, said, well, how stupid. If business people wanted to do business with China, they can go to learn Chinese. Why need so many students to spend so many energy and time to learn Chinese? That's 2006. And now I met this professor again, and I made a joke. I said, Professor so-and-so, do you still think it's stupid for students to learn Chinese? He said, no, no, no. Now it's a trend. It's a fashionable thing. And everybody needs to connect with China. And just as Dr. Bob Holden said, in China, all students, that's a requirement to learn the second language. If you do not pass the English examination or Japanese, or either one, you cannot move forward. That means if you do not pass second language examination, you cannot graduate from elementary school, middle school, high school, and university. You cannot get your bachelor's degree, and you cannot get the admission to the graduate school. So this second language is kind of requirement, is the first step. So you need to pass the second language, and then you pass the other major subjects, and then you can move forward. So it's kind of like our law. It's a requirement. Everybody needs to take that. And also, all the parents pay higher attention to their children learn English. Compared with the Japanese, Spanish, as English is more popular language. So our parents spend a lot of money, send us to the evening school or after school since we were in the kindergarten, like 4 years old, 3 years old. As long as we can speak Chinese, and we started to learn English. And that is the policy in our country. So now in Missouri, China is the third largest trade partner for Missouri. And in 2010, Missouri export merchandise to China is around 987 million. Just after Canada, 4 billion, and Mexico, 1.3 billion. So the third biggest trade partner. So that's the very close relationship between China and Missouri. And if like a Peabody, Budweiser, Sprint, Pfizer, those companies, including some metal companies, they have a very big business with China. And in recently, just in the end of October, Governor Nixon took a big trip, a big delegation to China and signed an agreement for Missouri's next 3 years export agreement with China is around $4.4 billion. So it's a very, very big contract. So the so close business ties means we need more cultural understanding. Because especially when people doing business with Asian people, not only Chinese, like Korean, Japanese, Singapore, Malaysia, and the cultural understanding is the best thing. compared with the relationship with Europe. And we do not like some like policies or rules on the agreement or on the sheet. First, our business started from friendship, from cultural understanding. If we become friends first, and then business will come. If we cannot become friends, and business will be gone. So this friendship is based on, established on the cultural understanding. And when you are doing business with China, with other Asian countries, those friendship building is very important. So if you learn one of these Asian languages, no matter Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and Japan and Korean is the fourth and fifth export countries for Missouri. So all of them, as long as you learn one of them, it will help people a lot. You can go do a lot of street things. You do not need to turn around. Sometimes translation can help you words understanding, but cannot help you heart understanding. And the heart still keep distance there. And we need to, if you know that language, and language is not only language, language is the root of the culture. And if you know the language, and then you will be willing to learn that culture. And once you learn that culture, you will recognize that culture's values, that culture's beliefs. You won't feel strange. Like every time when I go back after I come back, some of my friends will say, "Wen, can you drink the water in China?" I said, "Why not?" And they said, "Because that water is very bad." I said, "Not as bad as you imagine." And I remember when I first time took my boss to China, and he saw Starbucks, Subway, McDonald's, KFC, everywhere, and 9 West, and Nautica, and everything, and the Timberland. So all of those American brands you can see in China. And Dr. Williamson said, "That's amazing." And that's a secret. Dr. Williamson said, even in China, KFC is much better than in the United States. See, that's like, for the, how to say that, most of Chinese people accept Western culture, especially accept American culture very much, very well. That's because we learn English, so we recognize. So we will say, so every time when American play games, group or whatever, play with other countries, Europe, we always wish American win because we learn English. Just like me, if people ask me, what's the standpoint? You're on American side or Germany side or whatever. Of course, on American side, because I study English, I learn American culture, and I stay in this country. So that's the point. So that's the reason we need to expand our students' view and to let them know there are many countries, many cultures existing there which different from American culture. It's difficult to say which culture is correct, which culture is advanced. It's just different values, different beliefs. We can let our students learn through learning cultural, learn language, and then help them to mix advantages from different culture to shape a real global citizen. Thank you.
The bottom line here, listening to her comments, is about relationships on both sides. Next, we have Dr. Handy Williamson, who is the boss, as I understand. I got to know Dr. Williamson over a number of years and appreciate the leadership of the Confucius Institute at the University of Missouri's Columbia. Dr. Williamson.
Thank you, Governor Holden. Let me say that I'm very pleased to be here today, a part of this important undertaking. I must share some things with you on the front end. First, when we were invited to be a part of this conversation, I wondered what would it be about and why was it happening now? And once the conversation has started, what will happen next in Missouri in terms of funding language programs and cultural programs across the state? I suspect that this conversation will start it, and we would join many other states across the nation that have held summits on international education to stimulate forward thinking on the part of the citizen and on the part of professionals like us to address the issue. Now, I must say, we were asked to introduce ourselves, and I realize there's a lot that could be said. But first of all, I should say that I am a native farm boy from Mississippi, rural Mississippi, and I came about my interest in internationalization at a community college called Pineywood Country Life School many, many years ago. And I recall someone asked me, how did you get interested in international people? There were students at Pineywood School from Mexico, 39 students, nursing students, 38 girls and 1 boy. Also at Panelists School, there were students from Lesotho, which was at that time called Basotho land, a brother and a sister, and one from Nigeria, who was the son of a chief. And I recall most of the American students would look at the foreigners and say, they talk differently. Oh, they smell different. And they would keep their distance. But for some reason or another, I became close to those students. And over the years, I related this morning that as I became a consultant, I landed up in Lesotho, which was once Basotho land, and my classmates, Professor Burns Machabani, had returned after studying in America and working in Missouri. He had become the Minister of Education, and his sister, Mama Lena Machabani, had become the head of nursing for the country of Lesotho. Mama Lena did her practical work at Homer G. Phillips in St. Louis. Now, that was the beginning part. But Wynn asked me one day, how did you become interested in the rest of the world? I said, well, I attribute that to 2 or 3 things. One is Walt Disney, who's from Missouri, and the other to working in the field and taking a break and lying down on the ground and looking up to the sky and seeing the airplane pass over, and I wondered where it was going. The prior Sunday, I had watched Walt Disney program about the Von Trapp family, Sound of Music. At any rate, the imagination was strong then. And I mention this because I think the fundamental path to our young people is to get involved with their imagination and to encourage them to think outside of the box, outside of the barn, and outside of Missouri. Because the world that we live in is increasingly small, smaller than you think. Some people say that change is coming. I prefer to say that change is in our laps, and we must figure out what to do with it. I am concerned about the state of Missouri as well as the rest of the nation because based on traveling and working for 37 years in every continent and many countries around the world, I'm determined, I have concluded that we have experienced this notion that we were the exception for many years. We had that pride, and for many years we could rely on that because we were the new country and we started out the blocks as immigrants moving fast. And now we have begun to move slowly. If you want to lessen that, pay attention to the immigrants who come to America now. you know that they can be here 1 year and 5 years later they are homeowners and some are business owners, and they're speaking English as well as their native tongue. And so we have a lot of catching up to do and a lot of ground to cover. The topic of the panel was Missouri in the world. And I pondered that a long time and tried to figure out what is it that I would say to this group of educators who are embarking on a new, not new, but an expanded approach to international language education. And I want to say that Missouri has been in the world for a long time. Walt Disney brought the world to Missouri. Walt Disney is a Missouri boy. Mark Twain has taken Missouri and the U.S. to the rest of the world, because I think many children who study in high school in China read Mark Twain's book, but they probably know Tom Sawyer better than most of us do. The other reason is that the University of Missouri has been engaged around the world for a number of years, and I must point out that there's some things that many of us do not know. Beginning many, many years ago, the University of Missouri initiated a program in India which was designed to assist India's colleges of agriculture become more like American College of Agriculture. It was Mizzou's challenge to help shape an agricultural college in Orissa State in India. And it succeeded in doing that along with 9 other American agricultural land-grant universities. Apart from India, the University of Missouri has a long history in South Korea. Many of you who know the name of President Harry Truman, and some will remember that he signed an accord at the end of the conflict that brought Korean people to the United States to receive an education. Many of those people in Korea now are leaders in their journalism industry, in their manufacturing, in education, as well as in their national government. Last November, I was invited, after leaving China, to come to South Korea to speak before the National Assembly about policy. And I'm certain it is because of Missouri's long legacy of involvement there that yielded that invitation, as well as invitation for many people from the University of Missouri to come and help them establish their programs. We are concluding discussions at the present time to help establish a global university in Incheon, South Korea, which will be one of the hub universities in that region. Now, apart from Korea, China is important. Many people think that China was just discovered 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 5 years ago. But the University of Missouri has a rich legacy there as well. Those of you who follow the School of Journalism know that the University of Missouri School of Journalism has been instrumental beginning in the early years in helping to establish the first 4 schools of journalism in China, and they are very proud of that presence there. But a precursor of that is an important Missourian, a fellow from the Kansas City area by the name of Edgar Snow, and I advise you to learn a lot about Edgar Snow. Edgar Snow was a journalist with the Kansas City Star. He attended school for 1 year at the Missouri School of Journalism, but he was wise enough when he went to China as a correspondent to see the importance of his role there. He became friends with Chairman Mao and took on the role of explaining Communist China to the rest of the world. And that was an important feat. Now, he is a controversial figure, but we figure today that what he did in terms of building relationships is more important than what Joe McCartney would have said about him in those years of turbulent xenophobia. Now, Edgar Snow is still alive and well in China today. We had the privilege of visiting his tomb at Peking University and placing a wreath there about 2 years ago. But he opened the doors at almost every level for us when we visited delegation. I've been going there now for 6 years and expect to go back many, many more times. Apart from that, the University of Missouri was also instrumental in helping to established and strengthened the second largest school of journalism in the world, which is Moscow State University in Russia, which was once Russia. And the dean visited me in our office a few years ago, and we had a few comical comments regarding who was the best. And I had the pleasure of explaining to the dean from Moscow State that the University of Missouri takes pride in being the oldest school of journalism in the world. And all the schools that have come to being have followed our footsteps. But he politely told me that Dr. Williamson, you might be the oldest school of journalism in the world, but Moscow State is the best school of journalism in the world. Anyway, we had that repertoire going back and forth. Now, let me say this in terms of the University of Missouri in the world, taking Missouri to the world. We at the university are proud to host students from 109 countries from around the world today. We have 1,500 international students, both graduate and undergraduates. We have alumni in 116 countries around the world. We have partnerships with over 200 major universities around the world. And recently we signed agreements to help carry our research innovations to India and to China and other places. And those are events that are quite important. I mentioned that to say to you that the University of Missouri is Missouri's resource. The same as is the case with Missouri State and Webster. We, over the years, have built strong relationships with people around the world. Imagine Webster University cranking out, I don't know, is it 3,500 or 35,000 bachelor's degrees each year in places all around the world. And Columbia College in Columbia also has a large number of programs offering education around the world. The point I want to make is this, that in the era of this concept of soft power, our universities have been connected for many years with people from every corner of the earth. And those relationships are not to be taken lightly, because there is perhaps no better relationship that is created than between a struggling graduate student and his or her major professor. And once the students complete their degree and go back home, they will always remember their professor and their educational institution. And I did not come at that from a personal conclusion, but by way of observation. The last thing I want to point out is that the University of Missouri has become increasingly inclined to assist the state of Missouri in international trade. We were invited to join Governor Nixon in Beijing last November for their trade delegation, and subsequently took them to Shanghai Normal University to introduce them to our partners in the Confucius Institute. Incidentally, Shanghai is one of those places where people are going now to inquire about the PISA test that's been talked about. Our commissioner was in Shanghai during the time of our Confucius Institute opening. But apart from that delegation to China, this week later, I was supposed to be in Indonesia with former Senator Bond on a trade mission to Indonesia, as well as to visit with their College of Agriculture to build a relationship. And I had a difficult time trying to decide what was most important. But after spending 37 years working abroad and meeting people from all over the world, you wouldn't believe that for a farm boy from Mississippi, I concluded that what better way to spend this week than to be here, reaching out to you, trying to connect Missouri in a more fulsome way with the rest of the world, and trying to encourage us to step outside of our discomfort zone, because many of us are in discomfort because education is not fully funded. Teachers are underpaid, university people are underpaid in spite of what you might hear, and we have so many challenges facing us now to expand and do so many things that take up all the time of the students and the faculty that they have available. And yet here we are talking about incorporating international education. And I must stress to you that we have no choice but to embrace international education and language programs if Missouri is to compete with the rest of the world, if our young people are to succeed in a global society in which they will be thrust as they finish high school and finish college and higher degrees in the university. All of us, the teachers at the secondary level, elementary level, as well as the university, have a tremendous responsibility to take on that challenge. And I can't think of a better thing for us to do today than to be here addressing international education as it relates to the state of Missouri. Now, I won't try to threaten you with a Sputnik moment, because I realize that that worked a long time ago, but it doesn't work today. But I would like to say that I view Missouri as a place that is the center of the United States. It represents the heartland of America. It represents more of the traditional values of America because of where it's located, because of its population, than any other place I can think of in the United States. And as I've traveled around the world, people look towards Missouri because of those factors. And that is the reason why many families want to send their children to Missouri to study. They recognize the values that our people hold and the value that that can have as their countries evolve. And lastly, let me say that as I've traveled around the world, America might be declining in terms of its ability to compete, but America still has that one unique position of being, as Ronald Reagan called it, that shining city on the hill. Now, the lights may be becoming dim, but as I meet people, both high and low, they say, we want America to succeed. We believe in that thing called the American dream. That gives us something to look forward to as we proceed to acquire education and to develop our economies. And I say to you and to myself and the rest of the panel that we should uphold that American dream and invest ourselves in making sure that it stays alive and use that as a vehicle to help position the United States in a better way going forward into the future. Thank you very much.
Our last panelist, Rhonda. Good to see you again. Rhonda Broussard, founder and president of the St. Louis Language Immersion Schools. Glad to have you with us.
I'm delighted to be here, and I'd like to extend our apologies first. When Phillip started talking and talked about how long it took him to get here from New Zealand, I felt a little embarrassed because we drove from St. Louis this morning and still made it late. So thank you for making the point that it's often those who are closest to home that take the longest to get here. On the drive over, one of our staff members said, well, Rhonda, what's the point? Why are we going to this International Education Summit? Why is Missouri having an International Education Summit? My friends, my peers in St. Louis don't really understand our role in this. And the panelists that we've heard from today have talked so much about the macro level of international education, why this is important for all of our children, for all of our schools, for all of our cities to be thinking about. Our contribution to the panel today is really to bring it to that micro education level. We are all capable of introducing and sustaining international education, international mindedness in our schools, in our communities, and in our homes. And this morning I'll talk with you a little bit about how we're doing that in St. Louis and how some of our peers are doing that across the state of Missouri. It is inspiring for me to think about what it took for my personal journey to education and to international education, and to know that every student that we touch, whether they're in a formal language program, whether they're in a formal exchange program, whether they're in their school year program or their summer camp or an enrichment opportunity, has the space to be inspired and has the space to make something bigger of the interaction that we're giving them. So whatever you're already doing in your schools, whatever you're already doing in your home communities, in your universities, in your preschool programs, please keep doing it. If it's introducing chopsticks, if it's playing music that your children have not heard before, if it's showing them a cartoon that's in another language, please continue to do that work because it all has a profound effect on our children long term. I'm originally from Louisiana, and And people will often ask, why did I choose French? What does this mean in my family? And I actually didn't choose my language. This is the language that my family grew up with for centuries. My grandparents were the last generation in Louisiana who all spoke French at home and learned to speak English in schools. And I had the great fortune to grow up with them and to grow up learning the importance of our language. And the choice that I did make was that I wanted to hold on to our language for our family, that I would be bilingual, that I would raise my children to be bilingual, and that we would preserve our family's heritage. And today I have 2 beautiful children. We speak entirely in French in home and in public, and we are the last people in my family who still speak our language. My grandparents have all passed. And they are my very clear inspiration for the work that I do in education, but also for the bigger work that we do in terms of uniting communities. In St. Louis, we founded St. Louis Language Immersion Schools 3 years ago, and we operate under the assumption of, again, some of the bigger principles that our panelists have already spoken about this morning: the importance of language, the importance of culture and cultural dexterity, and the importance of access. So in our schools, our students have the opportunity, all of our students, to become completely bilingual and completely biliterate by the time they finish elementary school. Our students join us in kindergarten, and they learn their entire Missouri state standards, grade level expectations, and as we transition to the Common Core standards, entirely in French in the French school, in Spanish in the Spanish school. In August, we'll open the Chinese school and the Japanese school, and those schools will continue that total immersion education for our students in Missouri. Oftentimes when I explain that model, people say, oh, you have a lot of Spanish speakers in your school? No, 90% of our students are multi-generational American students from English-speaking households who don't know any more Spanish than Dora and Diego, Maya and Miguel if they have older siblings. And they come to school, she said, yes, Dora and Diego. And they come to school in kindergarten, ready for kindergarten, and they have no idea that the kindergarten that they're experiencing is not what their cousins and neighbors and friends have experienced. One of my favorite stories to think about the growth that students make. Think about a 4-year-old mind. Our students come in to visit our school when they're 4 with their parents, and the parents are so excited. I can't believe I have the opportunity to give my children the gift of language from so early on. I wish I had this as a child. And the parent will turn to their child and say, which language do you want to study? French? And the parent is thinking French or Spanish. And the child says, English! And the parents do this. I'm sorry. We told them it was a language immersion school. That's okay. Our preschoolers don't often understand that there are words for different languages. They think that there's a language that they speak and that everything else is gibberish. Gobbledygook is made up language because we make up language, right? That's a very common experience. So students will start off kindergarten and they might know 2 words for different languages. There's English and there's something else, Spanish or French. We have a student who started with us in kindergarten, and he was so excited in the fall to show me that he could count to 10 in Spanish. And I sit down with him and says, listen, I can count to 10 in Spanish. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This rapid fire. And his peers turn to him and say, Tavion, it's not Spanish, it's French. And he said, no, it's Spanish. This student was indeed in the French school. He was indeed counting in French. But he didn't understand yet that this new language was not Spanish. He thought all new languages were Spanish. And now he clearly knows the difference between English and French and Spanish, and can articulate to you that he is indeed in the French school and he functions in French. But it's interesting to see them go through that process. I understand now that there's more than one language. The next step that students get to, they get to this language piece, right? And really by the end of kindergarten, you can function on the same level as your high school freshman. So if you studied your language in high school, by the end of elementary school with us, our students will have eclipsed your high school students. And so by the end of kindergarten, they really can perform on the same level as a high school junior or senior. And once they get to this language piece, then they start getting into cultural dexterity. When our students start to encounter older students, we have many high school students, university undergraduates, graduate students who come in to volunteer in our schools. And our kindergartners don't understand why every adult isn't bilingual, because in the world that they live in the only school that they've been to, every adult is bilingual. And a student will say to her volunteer, well, why don't you speak Spanish? And the volunteer says, I didn't go to a school like you. And she says, well, did you pay attention when you were in school? It's not that hard. Because that's the natural experience that our children have when we get to start them early enough. When our students are learning to sing songs, when they're learning to play games, when they're learning to make friends, they learn to do that in another language so that if they have friends, if they have cousins, if they have neighbors, if their parents have friends who've traveled to other countries and now they come back, or they get the opportunity to travel with their family, they can go to the playground and play the same games and sing the same songs, and many times recognize the same cultural icons as their peers in other countries, because they're not only getting language fluency, but they're getting some cultural dexterity as well. And one of the things that is exciting to me beyond this cultural dexterity piece is getting to analysis and strategy. So we have students who start off at 4, they don't know there's more than one language. Then they say, okay, there's 1, there are 2, there are 3 languages in the world, maybe 4, 5, 6 languages in the world. They start to learn this piece. And last fall, I got a chance, thanks to the introduction of Governor Holden, to go to the Confucius Institute in Beijing. And I come back to campus and I'm distributing these decorative chopsticks to all the teachers. And so as I walk through the classroom, it's interesting for me to see which students know what chopsticks are. You walk in, oh, what are those? And another student says, are we eating? Are we eating Chinese food? And so it's a product that they can recognize. We get to one class, a kindergarten class in the Spanish school, and I ask who knows how to make a greeting in Chinese. Almost everyone knew ni hao because of ni hao kai lan, right? Everyone ni hao kai lan. So then we count to 3, people were very excited. Later that day, one of our kindergarten students, who had started off the year before not knowing the difference between English and Spanish, or French, is at the front desk. He's talking with our secretary, who is one of the most well-traveled staff members in our building. She went to high school in Hong Kong. He's talking with our staff member, and his question to her is, if the country is called China, and we call the food Chinese, and we call the people Chinese, why do we call the language Mandarin? And I overhear Duran having this conversation, and it was more proof for me that not only are our students understanding language, and they're becoming bilingual and biliterate, they're understanding their cultural reach, but then they're getting to these larger questions about language and culture. So for a 5-year-old in the city of St. Louis to be able to talk about the nuance between Mandarin and Chinese, 6 months after he was saying English is the only language I know, is completely changing his world. And it's not just changing the world for Duran and his family. It has this ripple effect on the playground, in the parks, at Incredible Pizza, and when he goes to his family reunion. When students come in who are living in bilingual families, whether they're in recent immigrant families or they're in bicultural households, and they're out in public, before our schools opened, the experience that they often had was that someone would say, why is that child talking like this? And literally what happened to me and my family, we were in the park, and I'm speaking to my children in French, and the other kids would say to their parents, what's wrong with that little girl? Why is she talking like that? Because they didn't recognize it as a language, and they didn't have a word for this language. We go to the park now, my daughter's 6. We always run into students from school, maybe someone from the Spanish school, someone from the French school, and we have this trilingual exchange, and the kids go off to play. And now the children in the park say, how did those kids do that? And they run up to me to tell me which new languages they know, or which words they know how to say in a language that they heard, or what language their cousin speaks, or what language they overheard from their neighbor. And that ripple effect is making huge changes in our local community, because families and young families are able to see this has value. This has a real currency for our children long term. Our mission at St. Louis Language Immersion Schools is to position all of our children for success in local and global economies. When we think about having access and being able to strategize about what you do after high school, the opportunity to perform in multiple countries, in multiple contexts, and to perform very well for locally held companies that have large interests abroad is a huge niche for them. We opened with the French school and the Spanish school, and in large part because our closest partners and our strongest economic partners in Missouri come from countries that speak French and speak Spanish. Next, we will open the Chinese school and the Japanese school for reasons similar to what Wang mentioned, that China and Japan are the next 2 global partners that we have for economics in Missouri. This is important for our children to get the language piece, to get the cultural piece, but to also understand over time they have greater interests, greater opportunity, and greater skills than peers who might not have the language or the cultural dexterity to be able to work effectively for a Peabody, whether they're working for their local company or they're working for them abroad. This afternoon we'll have a session where you get to hear more from some of our staff members and parents and international interns about how you can start small. And we are small. I said micro before. And in St. Louis, we have 2 schools, 530 students, grades K through 3. Every year we had 1 grade at a time. We're growing our students through graduation so that they can ultimately be completely bilingual and biliterate, proficient in a 3rd language, earn a Missouri State diploma, and earn an International Baccalaureate diploma, and start the path to strategizing about their post-secondary opportunities. Everyone can start something, and everyone can start small. We have a very committed group of staff and families who know what they want to see for their children, and are all committed to working for it together. So whether you're coming from a rural school district, from a standalone school, from a public charter, from a district perspective, from a university or community college, know that the work that you're already doing is impactful, and that if you're still thinking about where to start, we can find at least one place for you to start today. Thank you.
Real quickly, we're about out of time, but I want to ask all the members of the panel to just give me about a 1 minute, 2 minute answer to the questions. What do we need to do specifically to compete globally in our community? And are we spent, what are the resources that need to be spent to get this achieved? Or is there other ways to find it without going for public dollars? Dr. Williamson, can I start to work down the table in that regard?
Yes, you can. That's a very difficult question. But as I watched the Skype this morning, and I reflected on the fact that I have a smartphone that my wife knows how to use better than I do, and the technologies that we have available, I think we can start with encouraging and supporting the teachers to, one, address the global cultural context of education. And as they teach their classes that they normally teach, they have the option to reach out and use examples from other societies, whether it's math or biology or literature. You can start where you are. As Carver, Booker T. Washington said in his famous speech, let down your bucket where you are. The other thing is to take advantage of the technology, and anyone can Skype. Students can use their cell phones and their Facebook to begin partnerships with students around the world. We could perhaps mimic the old pen pal system and encourage students to connect on something with a purpose as it relates to education and cultural exchange. The other thing that I would encourage is that all of us begin to focus more on how we can motivate our state to begin to support our citizens, our teachers, and our students to become more globally competitive. You cannot do this thing on the cheap, and we must make some hard decisions in terms of how we're going to finance Missouri's capacity to become competitive. And I would encourage us to do that and take the lead from Commissioner DeCastro to get the conversation started and go back home and begin to push for what is needed. Thank you.
Wayne?
I think it's a very good way to educate parents first. And just like in China, in Asian countries, because parents pay higher attention to international education, their children started to have more opportunities to expose themselves to international education. So, like in our country, and we require children, we give the reading list to children, and then we say 1/3 must be from foreign countries. So probably when I know most American families, before children go to bed, this is the same in China. Before children go to bed, and the parents used to read something for children. Actually, we can select some like Japanese children's literature, Chinese children's literature. Just like Dr. Williamson mentioned, in China, almost all children knows who is Mark Twain, who is Abraham Lincoln, who is Martin Luther. So those things, I have a dream in our textbook. Since that's just a different length in elementary school textbook, in middle school, high school, and in the university. And we have Mark Twain's literature fictions in our textbook. Tom Sawyer is very famous in China. So that's parents is the first step, is the first teachers for children's international education. And then we work how educational leaders, administrators work with teachers, with parents. That's kind of three sides to work collaboratively to find the resources for our children, for our next generation. And then to work together to create opportunities for them. Thank you.
I guess I'll take a little bit different approach, and that is that my dad went to a one-room schoolhouse in the Bethlehem School in Salem, Missouri. Anybody from Dade County? It's a one-room schoolhouse. The schoolhouse building exists now, but the school didn't. But one teacher, 35 to 38 students, depending on the year, and they took Latin and Spanish and calculus, and had to be fluent in Spanish and to understand Latin enough to pass tests on it in a one-room schoolhouse. So when I think about what the solution is, it's not just resources. Obviously, resources are incredibly important, and we spend a lot of time, particularly in this city, talking about resources. And it's not just teacher pay, although they're certainly very much underpaid and under-recognized. All those things simultaneously have to be addressed. But with respect to this issue, if I had to give one piece of advice, it would be that the answer is actually in this room. The answer is you. The answer, each one of you is a visionary. Each one of you has the capability to do what the folks around me have already done. I mean, I'm not sure how I got on this panel. Everybody around me is talented. But the truth of the matter is that when you look at what Mr. Bradley's done or what Mr. Broussard has done, the fact that they've actually stepped out and do what you do every day and decided to take it to more people. And so I think that the result is actually this. It's us banding together, those that care. And I can assure you that the people that care are much bigger than the people in this room. It's amazing how many people actually get passionate about this issue when you start talking to them and you get broader. It's taking a small group of committed folks and making it bigger, and to taking it and making it part of the vision. And I honestly believe that if we took that commitment from the folks at the university to the folks that are already doing it to the folks that are in this audience, that you make the commitment to do it, the squeaky wheel gets the grease upstairs, and that's the way to make this a focus. And I really believe that it is vital to our future, and it's something that we all have a citizenship obligation to do.
Cool. With the sphere of influence that each of you have, I recommend and propose that you increase the participation. You're already participating in this dialogue, this discussion now, but spread the word. You're already enthusiasts or evangelists for the topic. Specifically, I come to you to say you can bring the world into your classrooms now. There are enough opportunities. We've seen them here today. I'm encouraging you to consider the idea of bringing those students into your classroom for a year and to gain the resources, the financial resources to do so by having them there, which is unique. And also the cultural learning that will go on. Bring them into your classrooms. You're already doing it in the private schools and in the universities, but don't leave the public high schools behind. Thank you.
I would offer 2 words, and those would be pilot and partner. It doesn't take very much to pilot a program once you can get a small committed group of educators together, parents who are together, who are willing to advocate for an initial experience. One classroom in a school district that has 2,000 classrooms could pilot a program. You could pilot a program over your winter break, over your summer camp, over your summer school, if summer school is still funded. You could pilot a program in your before-school program or your after-school program, but something where you're able to get families and students interested and excited and start to rally your base is a really essential way to start. In most states in the United States, language immersion programs or international baccalaureate programs, particularly at the elementary school level, happen as strands within other schools. It's fairly unique that you have standalone schools where every student is studying the language immersion international baccalaureate frameworks, but when you go out to another school district, you might have 5 schools in that district that all have programs within it, where 2 classes or 4 classes or 6 classes out of 35 are in a language immersion program. And that's something that doesn't change anything in the school budget, it just reassigns how you're allocating those funds. And then the second word, partner, everyone in this room is already committed to doing this work. Our community colleges, our state universities, our private universities are already committed to doing global education, international education, serving their international student population, and growing the experience of our multi-generational Americans. Let's look at ways that we can partner as K-12 institutions with our post-secondary institutions and with some of our preschool programs to bring in experiences, if it's for a semester, if it's for a week, if it's for a single day, that will again inspire action, inspire longer-term commitment.
I want to thank, you want to make some more comments? I forgot to mention one very important thing in terms of how you can start with where we are. The University of Missouri, as you know, recently established the Confucius Institute, and we have already begun to work with the school system in the city of Columbia to supply teachers of Mandarin, some call it Chinese. And we are also discussing with our colleagues in Kansas City and St. Louis about the possibilities. One of the things that we expressed at the very beginning is that we wanted to reach out across the state to as many districts as would be interested to begin discussions about how to offer Chinese or Mandarin language through the support of the Confucius Institute headquarters. And they have established Chinese classrooms in Chicago and Alabama and many places around the country. So we'll be willing to partner with you in that regard to help focus on Chinese language training. Now, in our Asian Affairs Center, we do have strong relationships with Korea and China, and both countries are anxious to have American teachers, high school teachers who speak English, to come across the summer and spend a month or so to teach English, conversational English to Korean and Chinese students and people. And through those programs, you would be compensated with a stipend and your expenses would be paid. And several people in Columbia have taken advantage of that program to go themselves to become exposed and to have that experience and then to bring that back to their classrooms. We will have a session on the Confucius Institute this afternoon, and Wynn will be sharing information about that, but we're also happy to share information about other programs at the University of Missouri that can assist you in your endeavors. The last thing that I wanted to mention, and this might be out of kilter, is that when we were in Shanghai last year, we were approached by someone connected with the Ministry of Higher Education, and they inquired whether or not Missouri, University of Missouri, would be willing to assist them in providing in-service training for principals of high schools across China. They mentioned the number of 1 million principals who would be brought to Missouri, not all at one time, to experience the American/Missouri educational system. So we anticipate moving out on that in the future as we talk with our College of Education and leaders of the campus. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. Let me just, in closing, I said in my speech that I was optimistic if we put all the resources that we've got to work on this. I am very optimistic. I mean, you just listen to the panelists, and every single one of them have offered ideas and suggestions on how we can do better, how we can really reach across the divide. This is not an issue for St. Louis or Kansas City or even Springfield. This is an issue for every community, every school in the state of Missouri. The mayor of West Plains, Missouri, his son is going to school in China. The walnut factory folks in Lebanon, Missouri are trying to build connections in China. So all of you, in your own individual way, have got business people in your community thinking about how they can connect with China and other countries around the world. Tap into them. See if there's ways that they can be helpful to you to get your program started that we're talking about. It can be done. The key is there's not one set way to achieve this. It takes creative people willing to make the commitment to figure out a way to think outside that box. I talked earlier about a lot of educational systems around the world educate students and so they know the information, but they've never figured out how to connect the dots. That's what the power of American education is all about, connecting those dots. So go connect them and let's have a better future. Thank you very, very much.